Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is Daily Drop number 379. What's going on, everybody? So, I was out at the Valley of Fire State Park for the last day and a half, trying to catch some great shots of the Christmas star. Unfortunately, I didn't get the kind of shots that I was hoping to get. It wasn't as visible from where I was at as I would hope it would be. But that's okay because the night sky up at at the Valley of Fire is just epic anyway. So I was able to catch some really awesome night grabs, and I was also able to get a couple of shots of the Christmas star, but it really, pictures really didn't do it justice. It just looked like a bright star, to be honest with you. Wasn't all that epic as far as in pictures. Now, it was epic in regards to the fact that it hadn't happened in, since the year like 1220 something. So that's pretty significant, right? And I try to get out to the mountains or the desert or the wilderness anytime there's an event like this, just because it's such a once in a lifetime kind of thing. So I try to get out there as much as possible and experience that sort of thing under the stars and out in nature. And it was just a nice, relaxing time all the way around. One thing I don't like about Valley of Fire State Park, and I've run into this several times there now, they have these really overzealous park rangers, and you're not supposed to leave your campground at Valley of Fire State Park after the sun goes down. So you're pretty much limited to wherever your campground is. And yesterday, I ended up in a campground that is not the usual campground that we go to, since we got a little bit of a late start. So we ended up at this primitive-ass campground. I had an obstructed view of the southwest sky. And then, to top it off, when I try and go get set up at a spot outside of the campground, and not too far outside of this campground, mind you, this park ranger shows up and she starts giving us the business. She's like, "Oh, the park's closed. Everybody got to start making their way home." Well, how about you ask first if maybe we're camping? So, of course, I'm not going to argue the fact with this park ranger. I'm just like, whatever, that's cool. So I pack up all of my gear and I move back towards our camp location. And I decide, to hell with it. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to climb up one of these mountains inside of our camp. I'm going to scramble up one of these little mountains here, and I'm going to post up on top of one of these mountains and get some nighttime shots of the sky instead. And it turned out pretty damn epic. So all's well that ends well, I guess. And I'll have some pictures to share with all of you relatively soon. I'm going to go through what I have on my camera, upload them, get them all ready to go, and then I will post some of them as well. So, as far as our episode tonight and our article, we're going to delve back into a place we haven't talked about too much lately, and that's the world of academia. We all know that all of these so-called high-level institutions, like Harvard, like Columbia, like Yale, like MIT, have all been palling around with Jeffrey Epstein or people like Jeffrey Epstein. We all know that these professors are taking money from wherever they can get it without any sort of vetting process even occurring. And then even when these people get nailed, even when it comes out that these people took money from somebody like Jeffrey Epstein, these institutions, like the one we're going to talk about tonight, always try and pin it directly on the professor. Now, I agree. The professor is the one that should be, held responsible. He's the one that set it up. He's the one that got the money, or she's the one who got the money. But the actual school itself, the institution, should share that blame. And they shouldn't be able to pass the buck and just blame the professor and scapegoat the professor. Where were all of your safeguards? Where were all of the protocols from the institution's end to make sure that this shit doesn't happen? There was none. They might have a couple of things in paper, right? Oh, yeah, we'll put this down on paper and we'll make pretend we're going to make sure that nobody gives us any dirty money. Yeah, right, okay. If you can't figure out that Jeffrey Epstein was an absolute bottom-dwelling amoeba, then there is no hope for you to possibly vet anybody correctly. And MIT should be ashamed of themselves. MIT, like everybody else, has themselves a little bit of an investigation into Seth Lloyd. And the findings of that investigation and the results of what the repercussions to Seth Lloyd are going to be are now in, folks. And spoiler alert, it's a joke. Just like every one of these other self-initiated self-investigations, it turns up bupkis. It turns out to be a joke, a mockery. What's the point? If they're never going to find anybody within the command structure had anything to do with this or had any sort of liability for letting it happen, then what is the point? Oh, I get it. You'll throw us a little bit of red meat, like the two guards who were supposed to be watching Epstein, right? And think that's going to satiate people. But it's not going to. In the old days, that might have worked, but not anymore. Not when everybody knows that the media is deceitful. Not when everybody knows that the legacy media does not have the common working man or woman's best interest at heart. It's all about selling units. It's all about getting clicks. If it bleeds, it leads. Never mind actually educating the masses. Never mind actually getting people hip to the shit that is really going on. They're too busy for that. They're too busy cashing their paychecks. They're too busy quashing Virginia Roberts interviews over at places like ABC. Our article today is from the Boston Globe, and as you can imagine, it is about MIT and the professor Seth Lloyd, who took a bunch of money from Jeffrey Epstein, who was definitely being bankrolled by Jeffrey Epstein. And this is a wrap-up of their findings. Headline: MIT disciplines professor over Jeffrey Epstein donations, but will allow him to continue teaching. There is no repercussions for these people, and academia especially, right? I know I haven't been going too hard on academia lately because we've been caught up in other matters, but don't think I've forgotten these people, because I have not. It is a travesty what has gone on in the supposed hallowed halls of these so-called top-level institutions. How has this been able to propagate itself amongst these institutions? Aren't these supposed to be the smartest people in the world? Aren't these supposed to be the folks that are going to educate the next generation of world leaders? Well, maybe that's the problem. Maybe that is our problem. That the next generation gets sent to these dens of scum and villainy like MIT or Harvard. And when they get there, you think you're giving your children over to good people, right? Educated people, real smart people, people who are going to make my child a better person, help educate them, and help them achieve their goals. But instead, you're sending them to people like Seth Lloyd, who had a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein and was getting a whole bunch of money from him on the other side. Absolutely fantastic, huh? Just exactly the sort of person you want to safeguard your child with. And I don't care if it's a college age child. Still your child. These are the people that you want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on an education to have these people educate your child? You can count me out of that bullshit, I'll tell you that much. This article was authored by Deirdre Fernandez from the Boston Globe staff. Calling a mechanical engineering professor's decision to accept donations from convicted sex offender, pedophile, Jeffrey Epstein poor judgment, MIT on Friday announced that it will limit his pay and his involvement in undergraduate advising for 5 years. Poor judgment, huh? So everyone's just going to take their cue from the Just Us department. That's why that Just Us department report was so ridiculous. Because now you see it right here with MIT. Oh, it was poor judgment. It was just poor judgment. Professor Lloyd's going to stick around. We'll give him a little slap on the wrist. He can't be involved in undergraduate studies. And we're going to limit his pay. So instead of $190,000 a year, we'll give him $175,000 a year. It's such a slap in the face, a joke. And could it be any more limp-wristed? Seth Lloyd has been on paid leave since January, after a series of revelations about Epstein's financial ties to MIT, and the longtime professor rocked the campus and led to protests and resignations. So, protests, resignations, all of that stuff, right? But Lloyd doesn't lose his job, and to be honest with you, I'm not even mad that he was on paid leave, to be honest with you. While they're investigating what went on, that's cool. No, he isn't guilty of anything yet. But now, when the investigation comes back, the hammer should be dropped. I don't want to hear about these sanctions. We're gonna dock his pay, and he can't be involved in undergraduate shit. Cool. So he has more time to go home and do whatever he wants now. Like that's a real penalty. It's a joke. This is toothless, and MIT should be ashamed of themselves. For people that are supposed to be pretty damn smart, they're pretty damn stupid a lot of the times, aren't they? Lloyd will have to take professional conduct training classes before resuming campus activities, including teaching. MIT Provost Martin A. Schmidt said in an email to the community on Friday. Well, there you have it, folks. A couple of conduct training classes is going to solve it. That's going to just make it all better. So you mean to tell me that a professor at MIT who was taking money from Jeffrey Epstein didn't know any better, and you're going to send him to some re-education courses, and that's going to ignite his memory about how to be a good human being and not accept money from pedophiles and human traffickers? Is that what you're telling us? Is that the sanction that you're slapping upon this man, Seth Lloyd? Boy, you guys really went overboard with this punishment. I'll tell you what, this is a punishment unseen or unheard of. An absolute joke. But the discipline is unlikely to satisfy some at MIT who had called for Lloyd's resignation and is likely to reopen one of the more embarrassing chapters in the university's recent history, as it should. Handle your business correctly and you don't have to worry about this stuff. Drop the hammer on scumbags, and you don't have to worry about this stuff. But in lieu of that, people are going to be apoplectic over this. This is another slap on the wrist. How many people involved with Jeffrey Epstein are just going to get a slap on the wrist? I guess all of them, right? I mean, average people, forget it. If this was you at your job and you took a donation, you took money or whatever, you'd be fired. There wouldn't be a paid leave since January and all this other shit that they have going on for these people. You want to talk about privileged and you want to talk about people of privilege? That's who we're talking about right here, folks. All of these disgusting, I'm better than you, sons of bitches. These steps cannot undo the harm done. Professor Lloyd's failure to share what he knew about Epstein's conviction when he accepted his 2012 donation was unacceptable. So again, he knew. All right, don't act like a couple of classes are gonna teach him to have a moral compass. He didn't care. His projects were so important that even taking money from Jeffrey Epstein is okay. The means justifies an end. All of these people be it these wacky, weird scientist types or the scumbag business magnates. It's all about them. They're all so narcissistic. It's so disgusting. I recognize that many in our community remain deeply disturbed by the interactions with Jeffrey Epstein, and that some will be disappointed by this decision. Some? How about majority, my friend? You better have your big boy pants on, because I am sure that people are going to voice how upset they are over this and voice their displeasure over this. So get ready. I'm sure that it's going to be your own students going crazy, going ham. I know if my kid was at this school, I'd be on the phone tomorrow over this decision to speak to Mr. Schmidt and ask them what in the ever-living F sort of brain damage they suffer from to think that this is a conclusion that's okay, that is going to resonate as this man actually facing repercussions. Because it does not, and it will not. And if this is the way MIT is going to conduct themselves, then MIT better get themselves some iodine, because this shit and this fallout is really radioactive. Just ask Harvard. According to a report commissioned by MIT earlier this year, Lloyd received $285,000 from Epstein, including a personal gift of $60,000 nearly 15 years ago that was not reported to MIT at the time. So this dude got 285,000 boxes of ziti for his projects. Then, wetting his beak again, he goes back to the trough for a little more and gets a bag with $60,000 in it. For what? Look, we all know Epstein wasn't just handing out money. We know that Epstein wasn't just giving out money just because he's a nice guy, okay? There was always quid pro quo. There was always, what are you going to do for me later, when Epstein was doling out the dough. And that's established. So what in the hell was he giving Lloyd this money for? What sort of projects did Jeffrey Epstein get access to that Lloyd was working on? And did Jeffrey Epstein pass any of those secrets from these scientists on to any of these intelligence agencies? I think that's a legitimate question that should be asked. Unfortunately, nobody seems to have any answers for us. In a statement, Lloyd said he, like many colleagues, thought that Epstein had reformed after serving jail time for an earlier conviction when he accepted a 2012 donation. That's such BS. That you really think, Mr. Lloyd, that that's a tenable position? You're going to defend yourself from that position. You realize your enemies have the high ground, right? And you also realize that they're conducting a flanking maneuver with their cavalry right now. But this is this is the strategy you're going to employ, right? I hope you're ready to get routed, because this is absolute garbage. Okay? Oh, he reformed himself. Soliciting a minor for prostitution? You don't reform yourself from that. Epstein was a predator, okay? All you had to do was a quick Google search, and you see that there was hundreds of girls. So if you knew that he was reformed from his prison sentence, how are you going to tell me that you didn't know about all the other allegations and the fact that he got off easy with a slap on the wrist? No one's buying it, Mr. Lloyd. Nobody is buying it. With 20/20 hindsight, I should have sought further consultation at the time over Epstein's appropriateness as a donor and communicated his past conviction, Lloyd said. I will always regret the pain that the involvement with Epstein has caused his survivors and members of the MIT community. So, further, as he should have communicated his past convictions to who? Anybody that is in charge of signing off on these donations shouldn't need anybody to tell them about the past behavior of a donor. You have the internet. You have a smartphone. Get your fingers moving. Do a little bit of legwork. Or is it you don't want to know, so that you have plausible deniability when shit goes south and we find ourselves here reading this ridiculous report? The cynic in me says, well, you know what the cynic says. The university brought together 2 faculty committees, and a majority of members on the review panel found that Lloyd violated MIT's policy on faculty misconduct by failing to inform the university that Epstein was a convicted sex offender, but that ultimately he didn't violate any policies by accepting the donation and didn't try to circumvent the university's donor policies. I can't even believe what I'm reading right here. So what they're telling us is they have no policies for this, and furthermore, the university should be ashamed of itself. They don't have a department to vet these people. I don't believe that. I really don't believe that. So just some random secretary in an office gets an email, say there's going to be a $20 million donation, and just okays it? There's no chain of custody for an email like that, or there's nobody that gets involved for anything like that. So to tell me that the university had no idea that Jeffrey Epstein was a sick son of a bitch is a bit hard of a sell. MIT at the time did not have any policy to deal with controversial donors. Of course they didn't, because this wasn't a one-off. I know it's sad to say, and it's disgusting, and it's depressing to think about, but this sort of money is so deeply dug into the very heart of these universities that it's not even funny. How many of these donors that are donating to these universities, folks, are absolute scumbags, money launderers, traffickers, human traffickers, drug dealers, you name it. And yet, these universities are just taking this money hand over fist, hands over their eyes. Oh, well, we didn't know it was the professor. Talk to the professor. We didn't vet. Well, what, we're supposed to vet Epstein too? Are you kidding me? And on it goes. And they just keep passing the blame around. And it never lands on anyone's back squarely. And they just hope that this story will eventually go away. But unfortunately for them, this is not one of those stories. And we're not going anywhere until a real trial is had and a real shot at justice has been given to these survivors, and till these institutions are held responsible. Epstein's ties to MIT became public last summer after the disgraced financier, pedophile, committed suicide, allegedly, in a Manhattan jail cell where he was being held on charges involving sex trafficking for minors. Former MIT Media Lab director Joy Ito acknowledged that he had accepted donations from Epstein and resigned in September 2019 after an explosive New Yorker story said that he and others tried to keep Epstein's funding quiet. Oh yeah, I'm sure Seth Lloyd had nothing to do with that. Seth Lloyd was just rolling on his own, kicking his can down the road, wearing his duster jacket, living in a world of one. Joy Ito gets the boot, but not Seth Lloyd. They both needed to go. MIT brought in law firm Goodwin Procter to review its relationship with Epstein. The firm found that Epstein had visited MIT at least 9 times in recent years and gave the university $850,000. So if Lloyd was responsible for his donations, the university's not, $850,000. And these dudes are trying to point the finger at just Lloyd? Well, I want Lloyd to face repercussions, no doubt about it. As you all know, I don't want middlemen. I am big game hunting. I want these people who were in charge of the decision-making to be fired. Point blank, period. Anything less is a travesty of justice. And frankly, they should be lucky it's just fired that they're getting. Top administrators at the university were also aware that Epstein was giving the school money, the Goodwin Procter report found, although it cleared MIT president Raphael Reif of any involvement in approving the gifts. Of course, That's how they have it all set up. It's like a mafia. It's like the Jeffrey Epstein ring. Layers of protection, layers of insulation. What do you think? There's any different here? You think MIT was turning down that 850,000 racks? Hell no, they wanted that money. They didn't care who was giving it to them or where it was coming from. And the fact that this, the investigation cleared Raphael Reif of any wrongdoing, it just, right there, that alone should tell you everything you need to know about this BS ridiculous report. Some female employees and students at the university's vaunted media lab said they had complained about Epstein's involvement, but were dismissed. 2 MIT Media Lab researchers resigned in protest over money that Ito took from Epstein for the university for his own investments in tech startups. So these lab researchers knew who Epstein was, but Reif didn't, Lloyd didn't, none of the other trustees knew, none of them knew, huh? That's what they want us to believe. I don't believe it, folks, and I know none of you out there do either. Students protested on campus, female faculty criticized the school's priorities, and disgruntled faculty called on Reif to step down. Epstein's donations put a spotlight on how universities driven for research funding cultivate wealthy donors and often overlook their controversial histories. Now, we have been going hard on this on the podcast. We haven't for a while, but as you all know, I had Dr. Stephen DeLay come onto the show and talk about this very thing. And it's prevalent within academia. These people are taking money from all sorts of bad actors, bad apples, and bad characters. And furthermore, how can Harvard have a money crunch? How can MIT have a money crunch? It cost $1 bazillion to go there. Epstein liked to surround himself with academics and scientists and courted many of the nation's top universities, including MIT and Harvard. Earlier this year, a report from Harvard found that Epstein had a personal office among university researchers, a dedicated phone line, and an unusual visiting fellowship position. High-level faculty at Harvard urged administrators to take the financier's money despite his record as a registered sex offender pedophile. Of course they did. And that's what I'm trying to stress here to you folks, right? I don't want to sound like a broken record, and I don't want us to have to go over, plowed terrain again and again and again. But anytime something like that, like this pops up, we have to add it to the catalog. We have to talk about it because it goes towards the overall bigger picture. And that bigger picture is, it's not just business, it's not just finance, it's not just politicians. Academia and these so-called top-line universities are neck deep when it comes to accepting funds and being in bed with scumbags like Jeffrey Epstein. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at Bobbycapucci at protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI at protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. All right, everybody, I will be back tomorrow morning, and we will pick up where we left off. Have an amazing night, everyone.